it comes to raising capital, the biggest mistakes I've seen didn't happen before the raise, they happened because of it. Raising and deploying capital can be one of the most defining or dangerous moments in the life of a company. To really dig into it, I spent over 5 hours in recorded conversations with 5 iconic leaders and investors. Together, they've built and backed companies worth billions, navigated successful exits, and lived through both turbulent and triumphant times. We've woven these conversations together into a mini-series to reveal the patterns and insights you simply can't see by listening to just one of the conversations. Whether you're raising, you're investing, or scaling, these conversations will change the way you think about capital, relationships, and leadership. Over the course of the 3 episodes, you will hear from Mitchell Green, co-founder of Lead Edge Capital, recently ranked the #1 global private equity growth fund by PitchBook, with investments in companies like Alibaba, Asana, Bazaar Voice, and ByteDance. Doug Song, co-founder of Duo Security, scaled it into a multi-billion-dollar cybersecurity company that was eventually acquired by Cisco. Gregg Kaplan, founder of Redbox, which grew to over 14,000 kiosks and over $2 billion in revenue. He's also the former president and COO of Coinstar. Now he's the CEO of Dentology, which has raised over $50 million and serves more than 60,000 patients. Julie Maple, co-founder of Firefly Ventures Partners, and she's a board leader for the V Foundation, where she's helped raise over $100 million for cancer research. And Brett Hurt, serial entrepreneur who founded Coremetrics, which was acquired by IBM. He took Bazaar Voice public, co-founded data.world, which was recently acquired by ServiceNow, and now leads Love Conquers Fear, a purpose-driven venture shaping the next generation of founders. Whether you're bootstrapped, Series D, or somewhere in between, these next couple of episodes will challenge how you think about capital, control, and what it really means to scale. What I've learned is the right capital multiplies your mission, but the wrong capital multiplies your mistakes. Let's climb.
All right, Kirk. We just did episode 9 before this, and now we're doing episode 10, which is part of our mini-series here on capital.
I thought you were going to say we're doing a lesson on counting 9 and then 10.
A, B, C.
Yeah.
No, we got episode 10, Beyond the Raise. So for those who didn't watch episode 9, go back and watch it. We've got 5 special guests in this mini-series with pre-recorded conversations, and we're breaking down with clips, talking about just kind of some different topics and ways to structure the conversation from things that we heard. You mentioned this in the first podcast. I wanted to bring this back out, that we didn't go into this with a structured idea of what we wanted them to say. Mm-hmm. We rather did the interviews, or you did the interviews, and then we went back and listened to all of them and said, well, what did we hear from the interviews that would be helpful for our listeners? And so that's what we've done. The first one was structured kind of around getting into the ballpark of this idea of over-raising or buying into the hype of valuation metrics, and really understanding how to discipline yourself and be self-aware with humility on how you approach that process. Mm-hmm. Today's episode is much more about beyond the raise. So that partnership forged between the operator and the investor, and really talking through the communication, the empowerment through knowledge, resources, practical help. That's what we want to focus on today.
Yeah, I'm really excited about this episode. And once again, not just trying to encourage people to go back and listen to episode 9, but 9, 10, and 11 are mini-series inside the season. And so to stop and just listen to 10, you are gonna miss quite a bit. You really do need to listen to all 3 of these packaged together. And they are with 5 incredible leaders that I've talked about in the introduction in today's episode. And so this is, to some degree, this could be the kind of so what, now what episode, meaning we've raised the money. We may have made some really wise choices, or we may have made some choices that we are regretting a little bit. And that's okay too. We're going to deal with that. We're going to talk about that, how to step into the journey regardless. It's kind of like, so what now? Here we go. Mm-hmm. And so I'm really excited about these clips that we're going to be playing. We did, over 6 hours, or I did over 6 hours of individual interviews. As I've said, people are going to be able to go back and listen to those individually if they so choose. But you've done a remarkable job here of creating a story arc out of hours and hours of information that's absolute gold. And so these clips are going to stand on their own. We're going to make a couple comments about them here and there. that we think are helpful or that will help our listeners understand them better. But for the most part, listening and hearing and learning from these iconic leaders is it's really special. I mean, I'm very grateful that they took the time to do this with us. And these are people that I've known for years and have worked alongside, so I feel very lucky to be part of it. And once again, kind of walk down memory lane with them a little bit. Some of the stories they tell, I was able to be part of. So
That's well said. Well, let's dive right on in. Kind of our 3 segments for today. First, we're going to go through the partnership beyond the raise, then communication as a superpower, and empowering through knowledge, resources, practical help. To open up this first one, we're going to go to a clip with Doug's song, and I'm not going to go through and introduce each person again in this episode. Like you said, there's an intro video here, and then there's also episode 9. So if you haven't listened to that, please get familiar with our guests by tuning into that. But first, we're going to go over to Doug. He's got a grocery store test for your partnership that I think is applicable for our listeners.
Well, the color of everyone's money is green. And so the kind of capital, I think, is really tied to the kind of person, right, that you're partnering with. And so, for a lot of founders, and they say the same thing, like my kids. I mean, maybe if you have a traditional banking relationship, right, with a banker, maybe it's a little more transactional, arm's length, and so forth. But for an investor, an equity investor in your company, you're basically getting married for a decade, right? Something like that. And so, it's actually my lead director, who I had, Lori Norrington, who had like a really nice name for this. She used to call it the grocery store test. If you found this investor in a grocery store, would you run up to them, want to talk to them because you love talking to them so much, or would you hide out from them in the other aisle? Because ultimately, it is more like a marriage than a transaction. And you're not looking for sort of a trophy spouse. I mean, sometimes people do a lot of that. But
that's a great way of putting it.
Yeah, but personally, I mean, the firm can certainly be important, but it is so much more about, I think, the partner, especially if that's an investor that ends up with a board seat or so forth. But focus on the partner as much as the firm, and to make sure it's someone that you really enjoy spending time with, want to spend time with, and find helpful to you, right, in the ways that a real partner can be.
There's a couple things in there. Really helpful test, but he made a delineation at the end that I want you to kind of touch on as well. He talked about the firm versus the individual that you're partnering with. Kind of walk me through that and the rest of what Doug shared there.
Yeah. So obviously the firm is, whatever the firm name is, right, on the door, on the check that gets written. But the partner that you're actually going to be working with can be different. I've had CEOs that have called me that the firm was a really good firm, but that particular partner they weren't aligned with, and were asking me, like, do I pass? Like, what do I do? And essentially, so what he's saying is obviously the firm has got to be, a part of that and can be important, but even more important, that is the person, because it is a marriage. You're going to be married to that person, if you will, and that firm for a period of time. Lori Norrington is somebody that is a general partner at Lead Edge Capital. Mitchell Green, who we're going to hear from as well, and I got to know her and work with her a little bit as she came onto the board at Duo Security, and she was that kind of partner to Doug. I remember him really leaning on her and trusting her at a high level, and obviously he speaks about her in high regard. So that's what Doug's saying. He's actually setting up this episode real nicely with what he's talking about here. So I'll let his kind of comments stand on their own, but he's just saying, make sure whoever you're getting, married to, so to speak, and he means that quite seriously. And I think you're going to hear that term several times throughout this episode and others.
It's probably one of those traps too, right? Like there's the valuation trap, but then maybe the trap of reputation of raising from a certain company where the person behind it maybe not is the best fit for you and your business. But, I feel like founders and operators, like there's a desire to, when the news comes out, you want that balloon to fly high. And part of being able to do that is obviously valuation. We talked as one, but another is firm, and so
and person in the firm. I mean, like I said, I've had CEOs who call me and said, hey, this is the person that will be working with me. And because I've been fortunate enough and had the opportunity enough to work with enough firms and people, I've said, like, I know you and I know them, and that's not going to work.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the firm is a great firm. If this person in that firm you were connected with, and that's who you should go ask for, you're gonna be good. But if it's this person inside that firm, it's not gonna end well for you.
Real quick, like generally, not specifically, but generally, like why is that the dynamics at play?
Because I've seen how they've treated people when they went bad, when things didn't go well. And as we said in episode 9, you're always going to hit a hiccup. That's what Mitchell was talking about. I don't know if we bring it out in some future clips. That's what I asked Brett. I said, have you ever invested in or been part of a company that didn't have problems? He just kind of started laughing. He goes, no, never. And so that's part of it. It's a character issue, honestly. I mean, if we're going to get real.
Yeah. I'm trying to move it closer to the truth. That's what I'm asking.
Yeah. So I mean, it's a character issue. Typically, they don't treat people well when things don't go well.
That's well said.
And that's what Mitchell said in the last episode too. Go and figure out the ones that didn't go well. Like talk to those people.
Yeah. And Julie said it too, and I forget if I included it in here or later or earlier, but she had it in her interview where she said she makes her entire, like when people ask her, like, can I talk to people that you've worked with? She says, I purposely give them the full list.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
I make them do their research, but I also don't, only cherry pick the ones that went well. She's like, I give them the full list because the right kind of people that I want to work with will go take the time to go ask the people that it didn't go well with, and really do the research and come back to me with that research, and I'll know if they're the right fit based on who they went and talked to.
Yeah, that's self-awareness.
Yep.
That's that self-awareness piece we talked about in the last episode.
Yeah, I thought that was a great point. All right, well, let's go over to Gregg. He's got a little piece here on how values matter in the partnership.
Kirk, I think you and I have talked about this in the past, which is early in my career, I got advice to write down lessons. And they're lessons that are either, it's been things I've seen other people do, and they could have been right or wrong. In some cases, I look and I say, oh, that person just did something really phenomenal. I need to make sure I do that. Or it's looking at myself and saying, did I do something right or wrong? And there's examples of both of those. And so as I've gone through different companies and experiences, I've written down these lessons. It's now in Evernote, and it's hundreds of those. And every now and then I go back and review them. And by the way, I'm about to get back to your question. And one of the things that I've noticed, and I noticed this maybe about 10 or 15 years ago, is that a high percentage of those lessons have to do with people, a disproportionately high. And the big kind of uber lesson for me at that point, which I've tried to follow, you don't always get it perfectly, is you just need to work with people that have the same approach to values as you do. Because it's, for me at least, it's too hard to work, and it's too stressful day to day when you're working with somebody that just doesn't view the world the same way you do. And I've tried to, and there's been really good instances in the past where if you could work with someone where, listen, in today's day and world, nobody does anything on a handshake. You still have to paper it, but you want to approach it and say, if I had a handshake, can I trust that this person will approach it the same way as me? And if you have that, that's really valuable. And because, when their approach is not always going to be, how do I exact all the value and all the economics and everything, but like, how do I do what's right and what's fair?
One thing I appreciate in this, and I want to get your take on, is that he didn't say only work with people who view business and the way that you do your, how you run customer success and sales and marketing and all the above, but values, like at the core. Like at the end of the day, if we're really going to boil all of this down, the importance of having people that are like-minded on the value side of things. Weigh in on that a little bit, kind of what you've learned.
So real quickly, I'm going to make this fairly simple and in a long drawn out way. Is, I've seen so many people come up with company values and write words and phrases and everything else like that, and pressure test them in hiring and everything. And that's good. It sounds a little bit like I'm being derogatory. I'm not. I'm just saying it's just like a tremendous amount of effort into it. But what I just heard Gregg say, and I agree with, we heard Doug talk about the grocery store test. He didn't call it this, but Gregg just said the handshake test. If I couldn't paper this up, and all I had to rely on was the handshake. Would I do this? Yes or no?
I like that.
Because there's a lot of time I've personally I've relied on the paperwork and been like, I hope we don't have to use this, but I would not just do a handshake with this person. And I've always regretted it. Almost every single time. When I'm having to overly pull in attorneys to get it just like, how could this go wrong? And once again, we live in a world where we have to do that, as Gregg said. But a simple test is if I just had to shake their hand. It doesn't mean I'm not going to do business, but it's just like, it's like if I'm going to, what he's saying is the people on my team, the people I'm going to invest with, the people, you know.
There's values that matter. And if you don't feel confident that you can get things done without, you know, that level of security, obviously that's going to probably throw up some flags.
It's at least one piece, right? It's not the whole story. It's at least a piece that you should at least list. Like, pay attention to the tension. That's what I'm always coaching my students. Pay attention to the tension. If there's tension around that, it doesn't mean you don't have to. It doesn't, but pay attention to it.
It's really good. All right, let's bring Mitchell in here. This is a great clip. The long-term cost of picking the wrong partner is what I'm calling this. I think our listeners will find this one funny.
If you're an entrepreneur, do a deal at a lower price and a clean structure. You should do that all day long.
And kind of double down, like you said, and really investigate the investor that you're getting ready to work with. Talk to people that.
Oh, you're getting married. Oh, you're getting married to them, and it's really hard to get divorced.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
It's like, it'd be like getting married in the Catholic Church, 100 years ago. You can't get divorced.
Yeah.
It's almost impossible. Or the way to think about it is, if you get divorced, your spouse is getting the company.
Yeah.
Your spouse. By the way, you sign up for a marriage, and you basically sign up for, if you get divorced, you're going to get thrown out, and you're not going to get any of the stuff. You might get your equity, but you won't be involved. You'll never see your kids. They'll never go back to your house again. So I think that's the way to think about it.
Mitchell's got such a good sense of humor and a great way of putting things. Do you agree with his analogy here?
No, yeah.
Kind of
No, I mean, he is so smart, and he is very funny, but he's not exaggerating. I mean, like, if we can just have a sobering moment here, as funny as an analogy he used, take it seriously. That's all I need to say.
Let's go on. He's got another one I want to play. This one comes about 20 minutes later in the actual full-length interview, but it kind of ties into what he just said and takes on a level of ownership and work ethic. This one's more for the team.
And it's funny. People will ask us, potential institutional LPs who don't know us well, ask us, they're like, how do you think about a minority deal and a control deal? And the short answer for us is, it's the same company. We just happen to own 60% versus 20%. And if it's a bootstrap business and has never raised money, the amount of work you do when it's 20%, or if you own 60%, is the exact same, because there's no other investor on the table to help you. It's just you. But yes, if you own 20%, if you own 60%, yes, you can go jam a bunch of things down the management team's throat that they must do. Then guess what? Any good management team is all going to quit.
Yeah.
So like, in theory, it sounds amazing, but like, you won't attract the right type of people. Like when we do a buyout, we think of it as like, we just happen to own a little bit more of the business. But again, we're not trying to tell you how to run your business. We're trying to partner with you to help your equity and our equity be worth a lot more. Now again, I actually think the biggest advantage to owning 50+% is, you kind of don't need to deal with all the other knucklehead VCs that are around the table at 10 different stock prices to figure out, to build consensus. It's like us and the founder. And it's just like, hey, what do you want to do? And so actually the less people that are on the cap table, which is oftentimes in control deals, the easier it is to actually make decisions at the end of the day for like the founder as well.
Yeah. So he gets a lot more into the weeds there. Walk me through kind of a little bit about what he's trying to say there.
What's really important that he's saying that he didn't say is that they truly are founder friendly. They truly do care about, obviously they care about their investment and what they're doing and stuff like that, but they genuinely care. No one says those kind of things unless they truly care. I mean, the reason if you go look and see who the LPs are and the general partners are at Lead Edge Capital, and this is not a commercial for them, it's just a fact. look and see who they have surrounded themselves by. It is putting people in a place so their entrepreneurs that they invest in can win and help. And that's what he's really saying. He's saying, keep it simple. If we're going to own a majority deal, it's easier not to, because he said once you get what he's essentially saying, when you make it more complex, which we talked about in episode 9, you've got people at different valuations. I've seen where people are saying, like, let's time to sell the business because they've made 7, 10x, but the guy sitting next to him just got in, 6 months ago, and they're underwater. As a CEO, you're trying to manage all these different things. Somebody's saying it's time to sell, it's time to go to market. Somebody else saying, no, we need to grow this. No, we need to raise more money. We need to, and you just create this complexity. That's kind of the practical, actual side of what he's kind of saying. When he's saying, tin knucklehead BCs at different things, he's just, being funny and being, Mitchell. But what he's saying is you just made your life more miserable. And he's just saying, once again, going back to, it's a marriage. Be careful who you're going to get married to, who's going to be around the table. Talked about self-awareness. Julie talked about this in the earlier episode. Who are the people that are going to be around the table? That's all. It's a very common thread that we're pulling through here, using different examples.
Yeah, and I think the long-term perspective here too is that you said this earlier, that Brett wasn't, when in his businesses, he wasn't thinking about the next raise, but like the long term, like the path of raising that has to happen to get to where they wanted to go. And I think that that's so true here because, if you're thinking about it that way, the partnership beyond the raise is not the initial raise, it's the path of raises. And so if you're going to, dish out board seats at every raise, if, and grow the amount of people on the cap table, and then kind of have some low conviction over here, and then here's new people in that, you're going to have a tight turn on needing to raise the next round of money. I mean, it makes it really, really difficult for everyone in the room to truly be unbiased and put the company first, and ultimately the expectations managed falls on the founder in that role. It's their job to then go manage that. Also, like, still run the business, but that is part of running the business at that point.
Well, and to double down on what you're saying is we talked about this in an early episode. Whenever I work with the business, people say, like, who hired me? I mean, it doesn't matter who hired me. It's who I'm there to serve, and it is the business. Business is a legal person. It has its own tax ID number, but it can't speak for itself. It doesn't go home to its kids at night and help get them to bed or go to their games. It relies on the servant leaders, hopefully servant leaders, to advocate for that. And so when you have a board that is having different, they have constituents that they're there, but then you've also got a team of people that you've hired that have expectations that you've made promises to. You have customers that have expectations that have contractually engaged with you to deliver. And so you start to hear, why is it lonely at the top and stuff like that. And that's why these decisions that we make, we're just talking about one piece of this. I just gave you a couple other, areas that you're keeping all these balls in the air. And that's why it is so important to have people that are close to you, including these investors, including if you're going to have a coach or whatever it might be, because you can't just go spill all this candy out in the lobby for everybody all the time. If you do, then you're not going to have any warning signs of success. You're just going to have the warning signs of really bad decisions.
Yeah, and what you're describing is really the messy middle that we've been focused on. There's a clip, not to spoil it, but later on in this episode that we have that talks about how you can't trust the investor or board member to also serve as the coach for the CEO. You've got to find someone that's separate from all of that can really be that person. I think Brett could almost describe it as like he likes to be that people for other founders, where
he's good at it.
He's like, I'll give you money, but I try not to take a board seat and stuff because I want to be able to give you my best. And for a lot of cases, his best is really being like a friend, that they don't feel this obligation to have it put together when they come to him. They really can just present the honest truth.
Exactly.
So I think that's the value of a coach for what that's worth. All right. Speaking of Brett, we're going to go to him here. Example story from his background on this topic.
Give you an example. I mean, so, data.world, as you noted, was acquired by ServiceNow on July 7th. Well, our Series A was led by Jason Pressman of Shasta Capital. And I really probed on references, even though I had known Jason since I was 26 years old. Okay. I'd known him because he was a customer of ours during the Core Metrics days when he was the head of operations for all of Walmart.com. And but I really wanted to get it right. And I checked lots of references, and a lot of the references told me that he was the only sane person in the room when everything was melting down. And we hit numerous rough patches with data.world, and Jason Pressman was really, really helpful in those and became the most important voice on our board in many of the board meetings from an investor side. And, that doesn't mean that he always told me what I would like to hear.
Yeah.
He was a sage advice and very balanced in all the times. And I would certainly work with him again and consider him a very good friend. And I've seen his heart too with his family and with his son, with his wife. And, he's a really, really good person. But what makes him so special is that he's both that and experientially, he's been through it all, both on the operator side, the scale up side, as well as on the VC side now for a very long time.
So you have a pretty unique story there. Do you want to add anything to that?
I just remember when I was doing the interview with Brett in the longer interview, if people want to go watch that, I remember this, and I also had the context. I think Brett was one of the last ones I interviewed out of these 5. I remember just thinking about over the arc of all these conversations, it was just this like water over a rock. Really do your homework. Really know who these people are. He's known him since he was 26 years old. That could have been check the box, like he dug deep, and that's what I want people to pull out of this. I mean, he's talking about someone specifically, and that is a neat story that he shared. But I want people to really hear. And what I remember pulling through this, and everyone's saying this, is like, check your references. This is like a marriage.
Mm-hmm.
Figure out who you're going to be next to. Think about the values. Do we have shared values? Like, none of them are talking about like, this person gave me the highest valuation, so I figured out a way to like them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of the themes I wrote down for this section to remember is that it's more like a marriage than a transaction, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not obviously the same, but if you're going to kind of try to give a frame of reference, that's at least how we want our listeners to be thinking about this.
Yeah, and we've talked about this, and I think this is a theme that's pulling through, is capital will either emphasize your mission or your mistakes.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It's got to do one of those two.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's jet fuel.
Yep.
To one of the two.
Yep. Either your mission or your mistakes.
Yep. All right. One more clip for this segment with Julie here talking about the right kinds of questions to be asking.
So what are some questions that you get that tell you that like this person gets it? This person actually is really doing their homework. I think this is someone that I actually am going to work well with. What kind of questions tell you that?
Yeah. I think that when I hear from a founder, I spoke with somebody that, you've worked with, or they've reached out to founders. Now I'm going to give, my complete founder list, the good, the bad, the ugly, ones that worked, the ones that didn't work. But if somebody has proactively done that, that really, makes me pay attention. And I'm really grateful for that. Right. So, because I know that if they're doing their homework on me, they're being very thorough about how that they're constructing a seed stage round, which sets them up for success.
So quick clip there. I kind of touched on it earlier, but that's that do your homework aspect that we've been talking about.
Yep.
And her willingness, though, that's what gets unsaid in that, is just the willingness, the humility to share the full list, right? Not all people will do that.
Yeah. And she said they're proactive in how much that gets her attention.
Mm-hmm.
Don't miss that point.
That's really, really crucial. Any final thoughts? Just partnership beyond the raise. I know it's more of an intro to the whole episode. It's not really a standalone so much, but any additional thoughts before we go to the next?
Nope. No, I'm excited to move to this next piece here.
Cool. Well, let's talk about communication. Communication is clear. And if we're going to compare this to more of a, like a marriage relationship than a transaction, communication is probably going to have some importance.
Yeah, and when I talk about that CEO growth gauge going back to episode 1 and 2, once again, not trying to, gratuitously push people back to other episodes. I remember I talked about on that vertical axis, the two things I continually hear is if we had good communication and better accountability. We're getting ready to talk about communication.
That's a great call out. Well, let's stick with Julie here. This is a clip maybe about a minute or two later than the one we just played.
I like to see early, consistent, and transparent communication. So from the very beginning stages, after seed stage rounds has closed, or if there are multiple closes, then it's sort of beginning somewhere at the appropriate time. Could be an email communication. It could be a broader kind of quarterly call. I'm talking outside of the board meetings, but I think that founders, if they can be consistent about their communications, tell everybody what's top of mind. And this might be a broader set than just the board. It may be the investor community or constituent community, and then see what the highs, the lows, and then what are the asks. So when founders are always sending an ask, they're putting their needs top of mind, and, board members or community members are more likely to take a quick action. So it's being efficient with their communications. It's not that these are lengthy, but it's continually dripping and keeping the company top of mind and aware of, the things that are not going right. I don't like to get into a board meeting and then suddenly start to see the threads of what hasn't been working. So I think if founders can really be clear and transparent about, hey, this isn't going right, and here's what I'm going to do about it, or here's what I think I should do about it, or I'm not really sure what I'm going to do about it. All three of those are okay, as long as it's standing behind that response and asking for other opinions or feedback, or saying, no, I've got it, and this is what I'm going to do. That's good too.
I've seen where people made the mistakes where they just assume they kind of back up the dump truck and dump everything on the board, assuming they're kind of really the acting CEO and they're going to fix everything or want to know everything. And I've seen the opposite where, Greg hinted at this when he said that he always is asking for resources and always asking for help. But other VCs have said, hey, other people don't really ask for help. So on the other end, they don't want to be perceived as they don't have it. So they don't communicate hardly anything at all. One of the most effective communicators, Brett Hurt's really effective. He has a weekly communication that goes out to all of his investors, telling them what's going on. It's confidential, but and he treats it like these are other people's money. They have a right to know what's going on and what's happening, good, bad, and ugly. And this is where I spend a lot of time coaching CEOs and stuff. Is like, what's the appropriate level that we need to be communicating to the board? What is it that they want to know? What's too much? And I'd rather have too much, and I've seen where some board members never read their emails. They never really know what's going on. They get into the board meeting and they're making comments, and it's very frustrating to the CEO because it's like, I've already told you about this. It's obviously you're not paying anything. So it's a two-way street, right? It's not just a one-way street. The CEO communicate. It's also the board members have a responsibility, I think, to be able to read and be able to show up and be able to give that feedback and not be like, I'm just using these board meetings to show up because, I sit on 10 different boards, which we'll hear about and talk about it, but they're sitting on 10 or 12 boards. So you got to figure out what's the right level of communication. Clear seed level is different than level, your Series D. And so there's not a, rules of the road essentially, but it is, she's just talking about building that rapport, building that relationship, knowing what level they want to hear, giving that to them.
I love how it's just very realistic about getting to the truth, and then very practical. And I don't want to add a whole ton because really there's the next, I'm looking at this here, the next 4 clips that we're about to go through are all very practical clips from 4 different people. So let's just jump in.
Yeah, let's go.
Yeah, Gregg's got a really good piece here.
Let's climb.
What to do. Let's climb. Good piece here on bad news.
Well, I think number one is you have to be transparent and candid and honest. Every venture has bad news. It's just inevitable. It's very rare that you're going to constantly have good news. It's easy to share good news.
Yeah.
You have to share the bad news. And if you look like you're hiding it or delaying or hedging or anything like that, you're going to lose trust. In addition, there's little things that you can do with your board investors that I think build trust, like saying, hey, anytime you want to talk to anybody on the team, feel free. Like, you don't have to go through me. It doesn't need to be a highly orchestrated event. If you want to visit our business, in our case, we actually have 17 dentistry clinics, and we've had some investors show up unannounced and just go in. In fact, one of them is a patient. And they read the signals. If you're preparing if you say to them, before you show up, let me know, and we're going to prepare and all those things, you lose trust. They want to just show up and see what the business looks like, raw and unfiltered. And that's fair. So you got to give them access and allow them to see access to your people, access to the business. access to the numbers if they're requesting it. And that builds trust. And you have to have some level of faith that they have been through this many times and that they're used to both good news and bad news. And they'll not panic if you share the bad news, but they will be upset, reasonably so, if you're hiding the bad news.
Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. And in the full episode I did with Greg, we dove into this because what he's saying there is very true. But what I pushed him on after this clip was, it goes back to what he was saying earlier. You better find people that have similar values, because I've seen if you don't have similar values and you open your business up to board members and you let them come in, I've literally seen them take down public companies because in the back channel they were and Doug and I coincidentally got on this same thread in our full conversation that yes, you should be transparent. Yes, they should be able to come in, but with the caveat of you better have picked right, because if you haven't, it can cause some real problems.
Mm-hmm.
And Greg's able to do it because he picks right. And you should be able to behave that way, right? Right? As an investor, you want them to be able to come in. You want them to be able to ask questions. You want them to be, to talk to people on the team and stuff like that. But unfortunately, I've seen board members behave poorly in that and use it as a to weaponize an agenda that wasn't fair. And I'm sure people are listening. That's why I'm calling it out. I'm sure there's some people who are listening like, oh no, that's a bad idea. Is it a bad idea, or is it the wrong person was deploying what should have been a good idea? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. That's a great question. I'll turn a quick question to you before we keep rolling. So if I'm listening to this and the thought of letting my investors, my board, go to any of my team members unannounced or show up physically at our office or wherever we do business tomorrow, right? If that thought just makes me shudder in fear, speak to me for a second. What would you encourage me with, and what's a next step I can take?
I would just ask the obvious question of why, like what's going on. We've got to do things that these are human relationships, which are messy, and we've got to do things that can handle the weight of the truth. And as the saying goes, you earn trust in drips, and you lose it in buckets.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what Greg's saying. Is when it's you're hedging, or what Julie said, I'm finding these threads out in the board meeting, or all these other things and stuff like that. And that's going back to, once again, Colin Powell's, the essence of leadership, those conditions of trust with your team, with your investors. That's what they're saying. Build those conditions of trust. And if it makes you shudder, either you've done something to break that trust and you need to own that and do something about it, or they have, and you need to understand what's going on there. You may not be able to repair that. That may be the person, and you may be living with a choice, like Mitchell said.
Mm-hmm.
You're married, or Doug said this, for 10 years. It's like in the Catholic Church 100 years ago, if you're getting divorced, like it's not. So once again, that's why we're doing these episodes. Like, think about these things. It's more complex than just, hey, let's be transparent. Let's open them up.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just check that box. Everyone can come talk to it. You got to be wise.
Mm-hmm.
You got to be wise.
Yeah, so much of this is very much like proactive. Do your homework before you get in that. So for the listeners who have not gotten into the seat of, bringing on investors and growing the board and all that kind of stuff, this hopefully is catching them at a great time. For those who already have and maybe are sitting there saying, oh, shoot, I really messed that up. Hopefully this is just good advice to really ask those probing questions. Why is that? What can you do about it now, rather than feel defeated by it?
Yep. And again, as we've said, just move closer to the truth. It may be scary, it may be hard, but that's where the answers are.
Mm-hmm.
They're not further away from the truth. They're closer to it.
Mm-hmm.
Move in there, like I said. And I'm hoping that whoever's listening that is really maybe like this is like just creating a knot in their throat or pit in their stomach, has someone that they can reach out to and help navigate through this. We've talked, and it's been, weekends and nights and everything. It's used this kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It's not, hey, we just sold our biggest deal, or hey, it's this kind of stuff, and it's real. It's hard.
Yeah, the messy middle.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go. This is just a good add-on quick clip from Mitchell on the same topic.
Communicate. Well, some of the best CEOs you've ever backed. Actually, I'll put Brett in this bucket from Bizarre Voice. Like I think he just didn't believe in such thing as not communicate, like under communication. Like every week he'd write out like an update on the business, and you know exactly what was going on. And he shared it with, I think it went to the whole company as well. I'm sure it just went to the investors. And it was, different division heads, or once a month. I think that communicating with people, if you've got good news, give it. If you've got bad news, give it faster.
You should put that up on a wall in an office to remind yourself, because that's easy to agree with here, when you're not in the seat. But when you do have the bad news to give, it's a humble reminder.
Yeah. Well, real quickly, I have CEOs that have withheld bad news and made investors so mad, and these are wealthy investors that would want to see the person in jail, even though they've done nothing to go to jail. Maybe they're so mad they would just want to wreck the person's life. I'm not agreeing with that. I'm not saying it's right. I'm just trying to highlight it is what it is. People invest. It's their responsibility to know what they're getting themselves into. No one ever expects things to go perfectly. Communicate it. Keep focused on the outcome. We're still going to get to the outcome. Here's a bad piece that's happened. Maybe I messed something up totally, or whatever the case may be. Hiding it makes it 10 times worse. 100 times, 1,000 times worse.
That's true in any relationship.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This is human relationships.
Let's go to the next one here. Doug, this is a bit more just tactical, how to manage board dynamics and expectations.
You want to have management systems and a management culture in place, right? Certainly to manage down through the organization, but also up, right? In terms of your board and the rest. Again, so setting sort of the expectations, not just expectations, but the protocols, right? How you're doing that, and the process you have with the board to do so. Again, there's some basic elements that I personally have always sort of had with my teams on this, where a steady drumbeat of communication, like you say, with the board, particularly early, maybe every 6 weeks, which I know sounds a lot, but that's not a board meeting, but meaning to say that we would communicate our plans, progress, and problems in the form of a board report, 3 to 5 paragraphs per department, plus my CEO summary, but just a written document with comments enabled via document sharing like Google Docs, such that my board members could weigh in right on the questions, or that they saw that in the board meeting, that we would focus on a couple, 2, 3 questions of strategic, right, concern, not just the weather report, right, of just reading the slides, but again, we sent that board report ahead of every mid-quarter board call or every quarterly board meeting. So again, a cadence every 6 weeks, because again, for fast-growing small companies, right, you sort of you have a better appreciable rhythm. The cadence of the business is actually, in my opinion, the most important thing. And I'll talk, but that maybe just, again, no single way to be successful, but just the way I do things, just velocity and iteration were sort of really critical to our success. But then, other aspects of the board is the construction of what those communication paths are. So I always had a lead director, even if informally, who would help me round up other conversations with board members as needed, who I could play out certain scenarios with before I ever took them to the board at large, who would help me understand and interpret kind of the board feedback, because again, we always had a closed session end every board meeting, and my lead director was always the one to give me a call afterward to say, hey, here's kind of what that meant a little bit more, and here's kind of how this other board members are thinking, and more direct feedback than sometimes the board meeting itself would allow. And anyway, so these kind of things I think are really critical, right? Creating kind of the structured format again of that board engagement, because board members are busy. And so to really have them meaningfully engage and really understanding, you have to be thoughtful about, like, well, how do they hold the context of what's happening in the company in a way where they can actually be meaningfully useful in some way, right, to you in discussion. And so a structured agenda and all the things, that, are pretty typical. But anyway, those are the things that were a little bit atypical that I had done that were, I think, pretty effective in making sure we had a highly effective board as a team.
Just the couple threads that he had a structured process of how he communicated. He was intentional about that. His lead director, we've been talking about that. His lead director was Lori Norrington. We've talked about her, and he trusted her. That's the grocery store test that we talked about earlier. That's who he was referring to when he was talking about his lead director, somebody that he picked very, very carefully, and someone that picked him very, very. Lori doesn't just work with anybody. And once again, I just rinse and repeat here. Starting to hear some of these things. Now you're just getting some real life examples of how they're playing out.
The interesting thing too is we did not, like I said earlier, and you've said this too, we didn't tell them to say one thing or another. We
No.
also didn't film these at the same time.
Yeah.
So the fact that they all just overlap, I mean, it just pours on like, okay,
Yeah.
I see how important this is.
Yeah. And I'm really excited about even our next episode too, because there was so much gold that came out. The next episode is just like, here's all the stuff we didn't even expect. I mean, all this stuff, like I said, we didn't guide them or lead them or have 36 questions that we were asking.
Mm-hmm.
These were just fun conversations that we were having.
Mm-hmm.
But to your point, like there's so much gold in this stuff, but even in episode 11, there's some spillover there too.
100%. Let's get one more here on communication from Brett. Just expecting things to not go smoothly.
You know, you should not be an entrepreneur if you expect it to all go smoothly. And frankly, most people are absolutely terrified of being an entrepreneur. I always tell those people it's much harder to have a baby and raise children. And almost everybody does that. But, you know, chapter 2 of my book is on the paralyzing fear of getting started. And that paralyzing fear can set in many, many times in a startup journey. You know, one of the things that I've seen, and I know you've seen this, when CEOs stop communicating that we've invested in, almost every time it is because they're curled up in a ball and shivering and freaking out. And that is the time where they should be communicating actually the most, at least to their board of directors, to really get help. And it's, you know, there's a lot of reasons why they're curled up in a ball. It's like shame, you know, it's fear, it's embarrassment. I mean, there's just so many reasons, but those are times where, you know, you really need help and you really need people that you can trust for help. And, you know, a good way to check if you're working with the right people on your board or executive team is whether or not you feel comfortable communicating with them during those times. I mean, that's true in a marriage or in a best friendship or anything else.
There's so many common threads pulled through in this, but I love how he puts that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, wouldn't you love to have Bret Hart invest in you?
Yeah.
He's invested in me my whole life. Not a dime, but time, which is way more than any money. I mean, that's just, he said it all. I don't need to add any more to it.
Yeah. There's this idea too of just being a for-you leader, right?
Mm-hmm.
So just, I think also hoping and believing that the people that you've brought on to really invest in your company, they're not just investing in your company, they're investing in you.
Mm-hmm.
And if that's true, that hopefully you've chosen some people that are for-you leaders, and when times get hard, you expect those to come. And so when they come, that should just be a signal and a reminder that, hey, this is why I brought these guys on, and or guys and girls on, and I'm going to lean in and reach out.
Yeah, and you heard Mitchell say, I mean, they've invested in Alibaba, Asana, Toast, Bizarre Voice. I mean, huge companies. He said Brett's one of the most effective communicators he's ever worked with.
Mm-hmm. I did think that was funny that Brett said he had a weekly cadence, and that Doug said he had a 6-week cadence, and Doug said, you know, that might be fast for people, you know, and you go find another successful founder who's 5 or 6 times faster
weekly,
you know. Which is crazy to think about. Okay, so that's communication as a superpower. Let's talk about the last one here. 4 clips in this one, a little bit quicker than the others. Just empowering through knowledge, resources, and practical help. I think this is less about giving, you know, a high level philosophical opinion on what to do, and more about just some really quick, like, you know, things that you can do if you're going to approach it with that self-aware, you know, humble mindset of a willingness to learn and work together to get to that desired outcome.
Yeah, it's empowering in other ways than capital can.
Yep, that's probably a better way to. Maybe I'll change the name by the time that we get into production here. I like that name. All right, first clip here. This is from Mitchell talking about investors that will actually help you. I think we're actually touching on some of what we shared in the earlier episode.
Well, a lot of investors will tell you they add value, but for many, that frankly just means showing up at board meetings and asking for the numbers. You know, founders hear that, and I think founders hear that they're going to help, and I think founders should expect to have introductions, help hiring, customer access, and then oftentimes it never happens. One question you want to ask the person that's going to join your board is, how many boards are you on?
Yeah,
there are lots of VCs that sit on 12 to 15 boards. If you are on the board of 15 companies, let's say you have to travel for 10 of them. So that means, it's really a 3-day affair, 4 times a year. It's literally 10 companies, 40. If you just had to go, if you had a board meeting, each company, it took 1 day, 4 times a year, that's 40.
Yep.
It times 3 days of travel, that's 120 days. Like,
Yeah.
when are you going to have time for a new company? And by the way, you're in the business of looking new, and you're at the business. You're in the business of like looking for, investors are in the business of looking for new investments. So I think it's like really important thing to understand how much, and you set one, see how many boards they're on, make sure they're not overboarded. And then two, really diligence and understand. I would recommend if I was taking money if I was going to get married to somebody where I knew that if things went wrong, I would basically be out of the picture and gone. I would make sure I would try to talk to almost every possible reference I could on this person. And I would make sure I could find some bad ones too. Or I would at least find the ones that didn't go well, because that's where you're going to really know like how this person is in the trenches.
Yeah. Yeah. And really,
And be like, listen, I want to talk to the founders that you fired. Like, that's what I want to talk to.
There's not a lot to add to that because he said it so well.
Yeah. I was doing the Zach Galifianakis, like when he was kind of crunching the numbers of how many days, you 120 days, or I'm like, I got all the numbers on a screen and math and stuff. That's a lot of time.
I like how he used the word overboarded, which has a double meaning, really.
Yeah.
You're overboard and you're overboarded.
Yeah, exactly. I was wondering, I was like, is that a normal term here? Or are we just coining that here? Let's go to Gregg. He's got a clip here on resource limitation.
This new venture I'm in, and when I say new, it's the last couple of years. Part of the reason I got into it was a venture capitalist in Chicago that I've known for a long time, and I have a lot of respect for. And when I think about him, what he does is so helpful, which is, and I'll just go through the list of kind of what the best venture capitalists do, which is, one is super responsive when you ask for help. They actually try and provide it, whether that be connections, advice, guidance, resources. And with this venture capitalist, he's done all of those. They also are, they provide useful help and advice and feedback. And there's not useful feedback, and then there is useful feedback as a CEO. And for me, I don't purport to speak for all CEOs, but useful feedback are, first of all, not obvious things. So, believe it or not, around the boardroom table, you sometimes get the input of, well, if you can make revenues go higher and costs go lower, things would be better. And we're both laughing, but sometimes you get that kind of feedback, and you're
absolutely,
like, yeah, that's just so unhelpful. But really, really insightful feedback about strategy of the organization, about things to be thinking about. And not that necessarily they're agreeing with you, because they're not going to, but real thoughtful, rational feedback regularly that's not obvious. And also recognizing, because a lot of investors are not operators. The ones that I appreciate, and you mentioned earlier in the introduction that I've been on both sides as an investor and as an operator, are the ones that recognize what it is to be an operator. Which is, for example, in a venture, you always have more things to do than you have resources. So just constantly saying, do this, do this, do this, do this is not helpful, because entrepreneurship is kind of the definition of trying to get things done without a lot of resources. And so recognizing it's really about stack ranking all the things that you want to do and prioritizing and choosing the best, knowing full well you can't get to everything, but just approaching it. And some investors sometimes approach it as if you can do everything and resources are unlimited, and they never are.
Common threads through here. Once again, not a commercial for Lead Edge, but if you look at their whole philosophy, they've got some of the world's best operators as their LPs and GPs, general partners and limited partners. To Gregg's point, is it's really it is nice to have people that truly have operated on the board, but also understand how to be a board member. So this is another thing that I'll coach people on is sometimes you get somebody that's been an operator and then that's all they know and their identity is tied to being an operator, and then they sit on a board and they want you to do it the way they would do it. Very key part, and this is what I tell people when they're going to get coaching or guidance from investors or whatever, find somebody that knows how to make you the best, not make you me. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, no, I think that's a super important point to make.
So it's not just that they're an operator, but they actually understand how to be a board member, and they have the gift of seeing your gifts.
Yeah, just the ability to play that role specifically.
Yeah, so. I've seen more operators come on, and they just want them to do it the way they would have done it, or make decisions the way they would have, and no two people are the same. And so you got to appreciate that.
That's really well said. Let's go to Mitchell here. This is his selection criteria, part of that conversation that you queued up earlier.
Titans are like world-class CEOs and CFOs and CIOs and heads of HR. Just because they're world-class at operating businesses, like they're probably not world-class investors.
Yeah.
Because just like I'm not going to claim to be a world-class CFO or a world-class CMO. Like I've never done it. I'm an investor for a living, right?
Yeah.
And so actually, if we identify the companies for them that are like kicking butt, and we say, like, listen, can you help this company think about expanding to Europe? Can you help this company hire a CFO? Can you help this company, get an intro to Procter and Gamble? It's like we've identified what is a good company. We've taken that away from them. And we're like, listen, we're going to run around the world and talk to 9,000 companies a year. We will identify what's good because we have this like very specific. By the way, how do we filter them? 9,000 companies we talk to a year across 18, 22 to 24-year-old analysts, like they're a pound of the phones and emails. And if I said you had to meet 8 criteria, it'd be like 90 companies or 1%. To do 5 to 7 deals a year, that's too small. But we say if you meet at least 5, it's about 900 companies or 10%. You do diligence on about 150 of them to do 5 to 7 deals a year. And how do you go from 900 to 150? Simple, like 150 to 175. Simple. Most of the time, like we're calling companies, a huge amount of these companies are bootstrapped. They're just not looking for capital. Yep. And so now it's about like, how do we leverage the LPs to help the entrepreneurs and build relationships with the entrepreneurs, some of which take years before they end up doing something with us, either selling the entire business, selling a minority stake, helping us get secondary. But it's all about just like building relationships with people.
So, if we have time in episode 11, I want to try and weave in his selection criteria. I would encourage listeners to go listen to the full episode if you're interested in hearing like what are the 8, I think he said 8 points of criteria that they specifically use.
Yeah, and they're not just criteria it is for their investing, but it's also, these are pretty healthy things.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a reason that they're so successful is because those 8 things that they look for. Even if you're not looking for money, go look at those 8 things, and let's try to introduce that in 11, episode 11.
That's a great note. Yeah, I love what he had to say there. For interest of time, let me go one more here with Doug, and then we'll shift into closing. This is on the need for a coach outside of investors or your board.
I mean, the board is effectively your boss as a CEO and founder, but they're not your coach. The coach is there to help you. And everyone needs a coach in one form or another, because you need the feedback, and because your board isn't that. They'll give you feedback of a kind, but not what you need to effectively manage the board or your team. And so, seek that out.
What should somebody look for in a good coach? What should they be looking for?
Yeah, empathy is sort of a first thing. They have to be for you, as you say. And you, by turn should be a for you kind of leader, right? But the other is, someone who is, again, able to constructively provide you sort of the feedback, ask the kind of questions that surface the kind of, issues that are uncomfortable. Because if you can't get at that, you'll never really get beyond those things that hold you back that you don't even know are And so yeah, there's a real I don't know what it is we call it, but it's an incisive and sort of determined sort of, like five whys style kind of kaizen. So like let's get down to the root of sort of what's going on here. Let's try to understand what that really is. And it's not easy to do that, right? Yourself, or even with any random person, you sort of have to have someone you trust.
I guess it probably goes without saying that you've served as a coach to Doug. So there's learnings he has in that also come from working with you. But what he says is so applicable, I think, of just in life having someone that will help you get closer to the truth. That's what he didn't say, but was describing, is just getting closer to the truth, and someone who loves you and cares for you enough to have the hard conversations or to ask the pointed questions that will help get you there.
Yeah, well, and it probably looks convenient that this was in the course of a bigger conversation, and it was a genuine question, like, what is it, that he looks for or thinks makes a good coach? And I didn't obviously to ask him to say for you or any of those kind of things. And maybe it is because of the time we spent together, and maybe it's not. But the thing that he didn't say that is critical to this and critical to any relationship, like you're talking about, not just coaching, but any relationship, is can we build those conditions of trust? Do I really care enough to know, or does the person care enough to really be able to speak into those blind spots and help you push you closer to the truth? It's not just asking hard questions. Anybody can ask hard questions, but will you listen? Only if you know that I care, will you be willing to listen? Only if you know that I care, will you even let me close to where your blind spots are? Only if you think that I care, are you going to allow me to ask you questions that make you uncomfortable, because you've got every single day is uncomfortable as a CEO.
To put it in a short statement, because you love to do that, you can do it, but you can't do it alone. And I think that that's a great reminder here, is that what Doug is describing is just this idea of not feeling the weight to do it yourself, and also the importance of strategic investment through people who will point you to the truth.
Yeah.
Let's bring it home here with Brett. He's got a piece just kind of on that partnership, the investor-executive partnership, and how that trickles down into culture.
And I'm talking about a different type of soul, but I do believe a company has a soul, and soul needs to be nourished. And you can actually, it's harder to tell now than it was like before. When everybody was working in person, you could just walk the halls of an office and you could literally feel it in your own soul, whether or not that company had a strong soul, or whether or not it was just ripping energy out of you in an extractive way. And I've visited, in my life, I've visited, I've been an entrepreneur since I was 24, but I visited many, many, many companies where you could feel like the gravity of working there and the fear and just the mindset. And then I visited some companies where it just felt absolutely amazing. I'll never forget when I visited, Custom Ink, Mark Katz's company. Steve Katz has always been one of my favorite investors and advisors, and really believed in me since my Warden days. But Mark's company, man, at that point in time, it was rated the #1 retailer to work for in the entire United States, above LL Bean and everything else. And you could feel it. It just felt like the energy was palpable. And that just, you could just tell the soul was vibrant and embodied.
He touched on what you had to say there, of just it's a legal entity without a tax ID, or with how do you say that?
Well, it's a legal person. It has its own tax ID, but doesn't have, it relies on everyone around it to give it that soul.
Exactly. And so Brett talking about just the soul of the company, you said earlier he's a soulful guy. And, I think that perspective of just how you feed that, and then that's trickling down to the employees throughout the company, and that's palpable. Like the example, I specifically left that in the clip so that listeners could hear that that's not just something that, you dissect in boardrooms. Like, that's something that's felt every day on the floor of the office.
Yeah. And I hope one of the things that's pulled through this whole entire season, but especially in this mini series that we're doing inside the season, I hope one of the things that really does pull through, and I say there's like a tone from the top. You've heard me talk about that. There's a tone in a home. You can walk into somebody's home and kind of sense the tone, right? And that's what Brett's talking about, the soul of a business. And you used to be able to walk up and down the halls and really feel that, but you can even still feel it. I'm on enough Zoom calls with, I can even kind of see it and feel it and how people are interacting, what they're doing and everything else like that. But it goes back to this thread that's been pulling through this whole time of like, the choices you make, the closer you get to the truth, the choices in the investors, the choices how you select people. We've had a whole podcast about that, the choices in how you set goals and have people achieve those things. What happens when you set up an organizational structure, and what's the communication cycles, and all these other things come back to oftentimes a handful of decisions, and they just play over and over and over.
Mm-hmm.
And no one gets it right in the beginning. Even people that we're talking to that are very experienced get it wrong. But it's how are we having the ability to learn from those that are around us to help us make those right choices. So the soul of the business, this legal person that is depending upon us to make those right choices. Are we focused on on the long-term outcome? Or are we focused on how I look today? Are we focused on how much money I can make? Or are we focused on how much money we can make for everybody? Are we focused on how much good I can do for the community and the larger population? Or am I focused on what's next?
Mm-hmm.
It comes back to what we've talked about in this mini-series about humility and that confidence. Where are you finding your real identity?
Mm-hmm.
Easier said than done, I get it. But I hope that's, if I'm listening to this and I've been part of thousands of conversations, that's a thread I'm pulling through.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really well said. I would add to it, I hope that our listeners also get from this that this is not just about how to build good investor operator dynamics.
Mm-hmm.
This is really about how to live in human relationship, right?
Yeah.
Building conditions of trust, being a good communicator, caring enough to pull people, to the truth and ask people to help get you to the truth, empowering one another to excel through resources and time and practical help. That's just part of being human. And this is the good side of being human when we can do this. So hopefully that's a string that gets pulled through. It's not just for the boardroom, not just for the office floor, but for at home and throughout all of life.
Yeah. Yeah. And you said it earlier, and we've said it through this. You alone can do it, but you can't do it alone. Be very, very careful about who you put around you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, episode 11 after this, we'll wrap up the Capital mini series. Then we've got the final episode of the season after that. So be on the lookout for that. Would love everyone's feedback as we go through this. We've got 5 incredible guests, Mitchell, Julie, Doug, Greg, and Brett. We're super, super thankful for the time that they've taken and excited to have one more episode here with their content and the things that they've shared with us to be able to talk over here.
Yeah. And just super quick, thank you, because you have done a remarkable job. You pulled all these. I did the interviews, but you made a story out of it. You pulled this together, and I'm deeply grateful. And as we get closer here to the end of the season and stuff like that, I'm gonna miss these times. But because you're my son-in-law, I get a lot more time with you.
Get to enjoy being together, just
Yes.
not in the studio.
I'm grateful.
Yeah, me too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
In episode 10, we saw that real work begins after the raise. Communication, trust, and alignment aren't soft skills. They are the foundation of durable partnerships. But here's what surprised us. When we sat down with 5 iconic leaders to talk about capital, what we got went way beyond term sheets and valuations. In episode 11, we're going to share some of that unexpected gold, insights about leadership, resilience, and the personal side of building enduring companies. You'll also hear a lightning round of questions that I asked them that pulled back the curtain and gave us a more personal look at each one of these leaders. Stories and lessons you won't hear anywhere else. That's coming up in episode 11, The Future of Capital. Let's climb.
Thank you for tuning in to the For You Leaders podcast with Kirk Dando. If this episode helped you think more clearly or act more decisively, that's good. But the journey doesn't stop there. Subscribe for more content on Apple, Spotify, or YouTube, or go to Kirk's website at kirkdando.com to inquire about coaching opportunities. Now think of a friend, family member, or business leader in your life. How could you help normalize their journey today? Share this podcast with them. We hope that this sparks meaningful conversations in your life and that it enables you to become the leader that you aspire to be.